On behalf of Professor Amir Hussain, I'm thanking you for your wonderful reading. So now I just love to call Dr. Shakur Papa. Let me introduce Dr. Shakur Papa. She is assistant professor in the Department of Political Science, Ashutosh College, Kolkata. She has published 22 articles and 4 book chapters in reputed journals and edited books. She has presented papers in national and international seminars and conferences. Her research interests including women's studies, human rights, and Indian government and politics. Our topic to discuss or present today is role of Raja Ram Roy in modernization perspective from Bengal Renaissance. I'm requesting Dr. Shatu Papal, please come to the dais and present your paper. And may I request you to maintain the time, don't mind. Please, madam. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, and dignitaries of this session. And my today's topic on rule of Rajaramnai and modernization perspective from Bengal Renaissance. We all know that Rajaramnai is one of the important persons of Bengal Renaissance. Bengal Renaissance refers to culture and psychological and intellectual changes in Bengal during 19th century. As you all know that the time frame of the Bengal nation from 18th century early to 20th century, and the Bengal Renaissance the focusing of the Bengal Renaissance was the colonial economic agenda, and social reform of Rajaram Rai was considered the father of the Renaissance, reflecting various types of reforms and transformation. And it is noteworthy that the Bengal Renaissance exhibited radical the transformation of Indian society, and its ideas have been attributed to the rise of Indian anti-colonialist and nationalist thought and activity during the period. And the Bengal Renaissance was predominantly led by the Bengali Hindus, with some figures and many more. And there were also very much important Muslim figures and who included in this Renaissance period like Haji Nurul Islam, Rokia, Saka Hussain, and many more. Bengal Renaissance was a movement characterized by the social campaigning, arts, literature, philosophy, Regian science and other field of intellectual inquiry. And we all know that this year we have celebrated 250 years of birthday of Raja Ramoda. That was on the 22nd May, 2020. And Bengal Renaissance took place from the late 18th century to early 20th century, as I before said. And historians have traced the beginnings of the movement to the beginning of the British East India Company at the 1757, the Battle of Policy, and as well as the works of reformer Raja Rammohn Rai, considered the father of Bengal Renaissance. And Raja Rammohn Rai, who was the first great disappointment to the Sirampur missionaries, not evaluated Christianity against the wisdom of his newly published Vedas, but he read data also about Islam and Buddhism. And in real perspectival sense, the Ramon was the father of the Bengal Renaissance. Ramon was basically rationalist, born in traditional authoritarian society. He was one of the first Indians to break relatively expansive atmosphere of Western concepts like freedom, equality, and social justice. And the Bengal Renaissance was socio-political and awakening in various aspects of human lives. And the movement questioned the existing rituals in the Indian society, most importantly the caste system, the dowry system, and the practice of sati, as well as the role of religion and colonial governance. And although the Bengal Renaissance was led by the dominated by the upper caste Hindus, Bengali Muslims also played significant role in the movement for the setting Indian society. And Ramon came of the age during a critical juncture of Indian history. The traditional modes of perception and behavior tended to become progressively inadequate and effectively responding to the situation created by the exchanges occurring in the wake of British rule. And Ramon realized not only the human volitions but to influence the development of human society and the Fed did not cease to operate simply because of the Fed assured their eyes to it. And Raja Rammohn Rai came forward various types of social reform in the 19th century modern attribute, and this brings us to question Raja Rammohn Rai and modernization. He mainly focused on the consolidations of the position of the traditional high caste and infantry and transformation of the medieval liberation into modern intelligence. And however, Ramon and like-minded individuals now appear named in their beliefs and even under colonialism. The big movement of Europe speaks capital revolution, the economic modernization of India, and it is said that purely explicit within the deep interest that cultivated class in taking British rule offers in 13 June 1889 issue of the Bengal Harvard paper in which Ramon himself had some property interests. And Raja Rammohn Rai has various contribution on reform and during modernization of Indian society. Raja Rammohn Rai believes that without intellectual development, the nation would not be opposite. He has identified as the transformation of the medieval literary to the modern intelligence. And despite not being formally associated with the founding of the Hindu college that eventually produced a fine crop of Western intellectuals, Rammohn was a unlimited of such education. And he criticized the rituals of the Christianity and rejected priests as the incarnation of God and was pursued but rarely of the praise when it met a strong protest from an unexpected target. Still smarting from the attacks of Hindus over views on Hindu worship apparently, and God had not considered the impact of his views on Hindu worship apparently considered the impact of his views on of the New Testament might have been certain Christian circles, and he founded Akhil Sabha in 1815, the Calcutta Unitarian Association in 1821, Brahmo Sabha in 1828, which later became the Brahmo Sabha. Previously, it was Brahmo Sabha. And he came forward for the emancipation of women, especially on the abolition widow remarriage. He attacked the child marriage, illiteracy of women, and degraded the state of widows and demanded the right of inheritance and property. And Ramon translated from the original five of the major Upanishads like Isha, Kena, Gatha, Mutaka, and he produced a modern commentary status and also the Bhagavad Gita through the later now untraceable. And significantly, Raja Ramon Rai translated some major texts both in English and Bengali, which connected him both the European and Indian. And in case of the educational reforms, and Roy did not disseminate the benefits of the modern education to his country. Did much so disseminate the benefits of the modern education to his countrymen, and he focused on the English education also. And viewing civil liberty, Roy was impressed and admired the British system of constitutional government for civil liberties it gave the people. And in case of the press freedom, when press censorship was relaxed by the Lord Hastings in 1819, Ramon found three journals. The one is the Sambad Kumudi, another is the Persian Weekly, Miracle Akbar, and Medical Magazine. And to conclude, we can say that Ramon indeed a modern man with a modern outlook in the era of the 19th century, and he tried to maintain the correlation between an India and Britain in various positive aspects. And Ramon tried to meet the harmonious unity and would ultimately into a harmonious unity as well as world peace and universal brotherhood. And all in all, we can say that Ramon made some positive aspects and made a major role in the Bengal Renaissance in the 19th century, and his idea of brotherhood, women empowerment, and human rights have also made a society unique in civilization area. That's all. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I like to call Dr. Smrita. Dr. Smrita Doctor teaches history in Rishi Chandra College at New as an assistant professor. She is also associated with post-graduation courses run in Acharya Prafulla Chandra College under West Bengal State University. Our topic today is Raja Rammohn Roy, a man far ahead of his time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Marita. At first, I'd like to thank the Society for Asian Studies for organizing such a huge gathering of its persons and allowing me to present my paper on this platform. Um, Uh, uh, when I got information about this seminar in a WhatsApp group, then I decided to think, write to something about Raja Ramapur Roy. Since my college day, I have some confusing perceptions about Raja Ramapur. My first reading on Ram Mohan, Rabindranath Tagore's famous book, Bharat Ram Mohan. And in this text, we all know that Tagore praised him exuberantly, described him as a man who knew the pulse of India, a traveler to Indian road. And after that, most probably in my MA course, I read about Ramesh Chandra Majumdar's controversial allegation over Rajaram. Uh, then a question came in my mind that how do we figure Raja Ramohun? After that, over a couple of years, I read many books on Raja Ramohun Roy, and I assumed an idea that obviously Raja had some shortcomings, some dilemmas, but above all, undoubtedly, he was an extraordinary thinker, a man far ahead of his time. In my present paper, I want to share my this assumption with you. During the 18th century, the India was in India's social and political world or political order was in a state of convulsion. New old political and social order had been near to decline, and new social order or political order was emerging, but had not been grown fully. At this juncture, Ram Mohan came as a man of destiny. Uh, he was born in a Kulin Brahmin family. His paternal family was a staunch follower of Vaishnavism, and his maternal family had Shakti tradition. So Ram Mohan was familiar with both of these religious traditions from his childhood days. His mother was a very pious and domineering personality. From her, Ram Mohan got characteristic strength and a spiritual mind. These inherent characteristic strength helped him to declare a lifelong crusade against superstitious belief and worship of multiple gods. In his short autobiography, Ram Mohan wrote that he learned Abik and Kashi because it was their paternal familial tradition. Ram Mohan's paternal family had the tradition of working in the royal court. At the time of our discussion, these languages both are official languages. Ram's father assumed that deep knowledge of this language would help him to get a higher rank job. As we know, Ram Mohan's maternal family had Shakti tradition. So, according to the family custom of his mother's side, he learned Sanskrit and Hindu scriptures. These learnings paved the way for becoming what Rabindranath Tagore called him Bharatpati. Ramon got his preliminary education in the village school. After some years of study in the village school, Ramon was sent to Patna for further learning, especially Arabic and Kashi. Patna was then a renowned learning center for Islamic study. Here, Ramon studied the Quran, Islamic theology, and Arabic translation of Greek writers, Illucid and Aristotle. During his learning in Patna, he had attracted Mutazila doctrine of Islam. Mutazila was one of the most rationalist school of Islam, partly influenced by Greek philosophy. This school developed three basic principles: the oneness of God, human freedom of action, and the creation of the Quran. The mysticism of Sufis also attracted him. Islamic monotheistic ideas influenced him so much that at the age of 16, he wrote a tract on monotheism. In this book, Ramohan raised a question about Hindu ideas of worshipping multiple gods. The kind of opinion resented his father, and he asked to leave his paternal home. After leaving the natal home, he wandered many parts of India, even Tibet. Here also in Buddhism, he observed the dogmatic influence of the spiritual hate. To him, it was a distortion of Buddha's actual teaching. Uh, all these influences and learnings strengthened his belief in monotheism. He rejected the dogma of incarnation and the existence of any supernatural power. He believed the concept of only one Almighty God is the fundamental principle of every religion. Through the study of Veda, he learned that the concept of amorphous Brahma is the core of Hindu philosophy. He emphasized three Upanishadic words, Tat Sat, and Akamaditya. Uh, he realized that the authentic version of the Hindu religion, the study of the available only in the Vedas, religious philosophy in the Vedas differed from the current polytheistic practices. Current religious practices indicated a decline from Vedic philosophy. It has happened because lack of genuine erudition of the scriptures and the priestly class manipulated this deficiency for their own purpose. They encourage the current religious train for sustaining their religious authorship over the lay people. They were not interested in people's true well-being and ethical progress. Realizing the fact behind the country's present religious fallout, Ram Mohan decided to translate scriptures from High Sanskrit to English and Bengali. Ram Mohan was determined champion of rationalism. He not only criticized the polytheistic and superstitious nature of Hinduism, but Christianity also had been criticized by him. At the same time, Trinitarian Christianity was the next object of his attack. In 1821, the Calcutta Unitarian Association was founded. Ram Mohan was the mentor of the newly established society. From the start, the committee's financial support came largely through the benevolence of Ram Mohan Roy. Ram Mohan not only engaged in religious reformism, but he was one of the solo spokesmen of the women's cause. Ram Mohan, as a humanitarian, took his pain for the women of our country. But in my opinion, Ram Mohan as a religious reformer, far more radical than the social reformer Ram Mohan. Because in the Ram Mohan, when he introduced some social reformation woman inheritance rights, and again he raised his voice against widow mourning. All these action he wanted to do some sensual spiritual sensation. But in the case of his religious belief or spiritualism, undoubtedly he was free from any dilemma. Ram Mohan not only introduced progressive thought on religion or social issues, but he was also a pioneer of Bengali prose writing and publication in newspaper. He had explicit political and economic knowledge. He was occurrent with the trend and upheaval of the world politics. But Ram Mohan had some dilemmas here. According to Marxian sociology, British rule in India had two dimensions. One was destructive and the other was regenerative. Ram Mohan welcomed the British Raj in India because he thought that British rule might be helpful for the country's modernization process. He had a Benthamite theory of the providential nature of the British government. He threw a dinner party in 1823 after hearing the news of the liberation of the Spanish colonies of South America from the tyranny of the Spain. He supported the struggle of the Greek against the Turk. Still, on the contrary, he never expressed his anguish against the British colonization of India. Aurobindo Poddar showed that when Ram Mohan wrote a plea against the Press Act, he also expressed his boundless confidence and loyalty to the British government. But Raja had the spirit of nationalism. Bhupendranath Dutta wrote that Raja was motivated by it to start from his reform agitation. He was also aware of the dark side of colonial rule. In 1831, Ram Mohan had visualized the necessity of a supranational organization for settling all disputes among nations and for furthering the cause of peace in the world. And this made him a universal man. Ram Mohan Roy was considered the father of journalism in India. Around 1821, he launched three newspapers, Shambat Kaumudi in Bengali, Miratut Akbar in Persian, and the Brahmanical magazine in English. Raja took this effort because he had campaigned against conservative forces and propagated his reformist agenda through this medium. Ram Mohan Roy's publication marked the true beginning of Indian journalism. They were addressed mainly to Indians, but also appealed to the better sense of Englishmen living in India. Sambat Kaumadi became the instrument of social reform movement. The paid were between Sambat Kaumadi and Samachar Chandrika, a newspaper published by the conservative force of the Hindu society, regenerated a new kind of consciousness among the people. Democratic awareness was discernible among the educated Bengali middle class, which in latter motivated the nation to engage in a greater struggle. Sorry. When the British government introduced the Raipura's Press Act in 1823 to topple the democratic voices of the Indian faith, Raja stood against these draconian restrictions. Raja Rammohun Roy was also known as the father of Bengali prose. In those days, the Bengali language did not take its modern shape. Sanskrit and Persian language were the medium of scholarly discussion. Bengali prose was developed by the infinite missionaries of Sirampur and the Pandits of Fort William College. But these books were either translation, were gospel biographies of the Christian monks, or a kind of textbooks written either translation translation. A revolutionary change was noticeable in Bengali prose with the advent of Raja Rammohun Roy in the field of Bengali literature. The book and essay written by Rammohun were not merely translations or textbooks. It was given birth to a new style of prose writing, what may be called argumentative prose style. He was probably the first thinker who thought about India's economic problem, and astonishingly, what he discussed regarding Indian economy 50 years back, the same observation were written by Dadabhai Naoroji, Ramesh Chandra Dotto, and Ranade, the stalwart economic thinker. Famous economic. Now I conclude my paper. Just say two or three lines conclusions. In the 19th century, a kind of awakening was still fast in Bengal. Raja was the central figure of this arising. Contact with the West paved the ground for this kind of awakening, and English education was a key opening the whole civilization of West. Thank you. But constraint of time, I cannot read my newspaper.
Understood. 12 minutes. After that, we are really sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
But we have to think of it.
Yes.
Please don't mind.
No.
Now, thank you. Thank you. Very interesting paper. You have to give your paper and we will publish it. Now, I would like to call Anandita Viswas. Dr. Anandita Viswas, please be there. And Dr. Anandita Viswas is Assistant Professor in Political Science at Harvard Women's University. She has research including in the political thought, in politics and gender studies. Madam, please try to complete. Yeah, I have already. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam, and all the dignitaries present here. My special thanks definitely goes to Kolkata Society for Asian Studies for giving me this opportunity to share my views today. Though I have nothing new to say because we have already heard so many important aspects regarding Raja Rammohun Roy, and I simply embrace my humble submission, paucity of my knowledge about Rammohun Roy's philosophical antecedents. But as a nice student of political science, I'm very much interested to study Rammohun Roy. I present my paper with all your permission. Well, from Ramchandra Guha to many historians and political scientists who have recognized Raja Rammohun Roy as the father of modern India and the first liberal. He has been actually the focus of scholastic world due to his profound knowledge and rational perceptivity. His philosophical understanding, his deliberations regarding social malaise, political disposition, and nationalistic predisposition still remain the subject of heated controversy and argumentation. And that is why we are here. The history of modern India starts with Ramanujan. If modernity is understood as a perspective, an offshoot of European Renaissance, and its criteria being scientific outlook, reasoning, and individualism, then undoubtedly Ram Mohan was a harbinger of modernity in India, because not only in his thought but also in his actions, through his actions, he initiated the process of modernization in India. We all know that he was born in a very, very, very crucial juncture when India was experiencing a turmoil, whether political, economic, social, but most importantly, there was a kind of psychological void, psychological anxiety that had gripped Indian society, and that resulted in social instability. And reasoned acceptance and blind preference had taken the place of critical analysis. He appeared in such a critical moment of Indian history, would initiate the debate of Bengal Renaissance. So he actually initiated many debates, and one of them was definitely Bengal Renaissance. Renaissance brought to the fore the image of an autonomous man who, superseding God, became the center of the universe. Earlier, destiny was destined, but now modernity focused on human prowess. Now, man is the creator of his own destiny, equipped with the power of reason. Man is now a free intellectual agent to the thinking process, and his thinking process are not coerced by any historical or cultural circumstances. The cogito here is very much conscious, self-knowable, autonomous, and coherent. The term Renaissance invokes a kind of spirit of creativity and intellectualism. The fact is that there was a kind of intellectual resurgence in Bengal when creativity reached pinnacle of glory instituted by a galaxy of eminent personalities. So there was a kind of galaxy, there were many personalities. So Ram Mohan initiated the process, but there were many. In fact, 19th century Bengal witnessed a huge cultural collision between the West and the East that resulted in a creative encounter between some eclectic Indian minds and Western scholasticism. But it was with Ram Mohan Roy that this cultural engagement from its embryonic state would witness a fruition within a century, within a period of 100 years. Modernity as a conceptual framework signifies a mental attitude structured by reasoning, autonomy, coherence, and rationality. Ram Mohan not only transformed the substantive ideas of modernity, but he also adopted and applied it to local issues. And that is the uniqueness of Ram Mohan Roy. It was typical to Indian experience. His ideas flourished and thought process developed in the midst of a creative cross-cultural rendezvous between rationalism and spiritualism. His intellectual locus was not Europe, but Indian socio-political environment that needed a huge propelling from within its core. He was not concerned with the issues of superiority and inferiority of civilization. He was rather an activist, and his prime concern was to save and nurture humanitarian ethics on moral and rational parameter. He despised Hindu rites and vociferously attacked every integrity of the rituals that collided with his sense of reason. And here, Ram Mohan was really modern. Despite his unfathomable admiration for the teachings of Christ, he never thought of formal conversion to Christianity. His 1820 publication created an uproar among the Christians. They vehemently denounced it as a caricature, labeling Roy as a heathen. His life was a life of mind, a cognitive mind. Since his first theological confrontation with his father, he was extensively working on his mind. He studied extensively, he gained knowledge, interrogated theologians of different colors, dissected Brahmanism, searched rationality in the Vedas, sought logic behind the practice of Shoti, and vehemently opposed every doctrine, every practice, every idea that contradicted reason, but most importantly, humanism. And in his fight, he actually armored himself with knowledge, armored himself with profundity. His knowledge of Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, Latin, Greek enabled him to closely scrutinize the basics of theological interpretation. His in-depth knowledge of Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam made him ponder upon the subject of polytheism and idolatry. Tuhfatul Muwahhidin published was the first testimony of royal steadfast commitment towards rationality. The Brahmo religion as a mental construct negated certain features of Hinduism which were not in conformity with the moral reasoning. He not only attempted to abolish polytheism and idolatry in his Brahmo conceptualization, he also repudiated Christian Trinitarianism that provoked Christian missionaries to turn hostile to him. He possessed great admiration for Christ and the ethical precepts, but contested the theological passages and fables associated with Christ. But his admiration for Christ made the Bishop of Calcutta believe that he was a Christian convert and congratulated him, to which Roy replied, "My lord, you are under mistake. I have not laid down one superstition to take up another." To conclude, Roy was a man of intellect possessing a cognitive mind, where he would believe in nothing but test everything on the parameter, on the touchstone of rationality. For Kant, another harbinger of modernity, if enlightenment was to have courage to use your own understanding in a similar tone to Kantian observation of human intellect, Ram Mohan too believed that human being possessed an innate faculty which would help one to distinguish the truth from the untruth and the true propositions from the fallacious one before accepting any religious doctrine, any philosophical doctrine whatsoever. However, when Western world was declaring that God is dead, Roy's Eastern orientation made him believe in the existence of the Supreme Being, the creator of the universe, who has endowed in each individual intellectual faculty to differentiate good and bad, truth and untruth, and not just blindly follow the footsteps of fellow brethren. So according to Ram Mohan, intellectual faculty, which is a valuable divine gift, should not be wasted. Thank you so much.
So wonderful. And within the time that
it's 8 minutes,
so
33
much.
seconds.
Yes. Thank you so much. So really interesting and very nice and instructive. Whatever you say, the lines, so many, really, so many points. Then excellent, excellent. And now I just I like to call Sharbani Guru Kushal. I'm so sorry. Sharbani Guru Kushal, Associate Professor of Science College, topic. Mohan Roy, rare contribution of liberal diversity.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Kolkata Society of Asian Studies, for giving me this opportunity. Time is limited, so paper is limited. I'm a sound abrupt or inconsistent sometimes. I will just uh, throw some observations on the Ramayana and will raise some questions. Try to. My paper was Ram Mohan Roy, a rare combination of liberal versatility. While crossing the Baliganj Pahadi Junction on the day of Shivratri of February 2003, I saw a long queue of women heading towards the temple with offerings in their hands. Instantly, it created in my mind that the temple is Shruti Mondi of Kolkata metropolis. And 200 years before, in the same city, a man named Ram Mohan Roy fought an arduous social and intellectual battle, both against indigenous and colonial conservatives, to get the Shruti regulation act passed. And within months or so, we are going to celebrate his 250th birthday here past. So what is Shruti or Ram Mohan? Ram Mohan Roy, the first Indian modernizer, was a rare combination of multiple aspects. A social reformer, a founder of new intellectual religion, an avid rationalist, and prophet of humanity. He never has separated himself from respecting humanity. My country learned from him the values of liberty, values written in individuals' human rights for the first time. He was the first modern socio-political thinker who chose his path conscious. I emphasize on the word conscious and realized the time has come to cross the boundaries of indigenous life. Otherwise, we have to remain under darkness forever. The most original thing about Ramanujan is that he gave birth to a new consciousness and aspiration of Western learning, but did not negate for a single moment the Indianness, the essence of India. Actually, for Ram Mohan, insistence on religious reform stemmed from the urge to gain some advantage for the country in negotiations with colonial. He categorically has stated that it is, I think, necessary that some change should take place in the religion, at least for the sake of political advantage and social bonds. So rational. A section of Christian missionaries expected that Ram Mohan is going to be a counselor, but that didn't happen, and Ram Mohan snubbed it in such a way which my earlier speakers just as mentioned. Actually, to him, religious leaders discovered dogmas and faith and presented them as truth by various deceptions, to quote him, various deceptions driven by their narrow selfish ends. This is something contemporary of Ram. His contemporariness actually is tremendous because more than 2 centuries ago, he analyzed a necessary truth which till date our society has failed. He was not antagonistic to religion, but was completely against religious business. Another thing is that Ram Mohan tried to democratize by protesting against the prohibitory practice of giving religious texts by women. At the same time, Ram translated and printed scriptures, religious texts in Hindi, Bengali, and English. And by done that, undoubtedly, he acted in a blasphemous manner. But definitely, that was progressive for us, for the post-check, definitely. Ramon believed that religion should have the capacity to address every problem. And here also, today's religion is something which is still waiting for another Ramon to come. Relationship between Ramon and colonial authority was marked by a roller coaster. The British authority, on the one hand, found a comfort zone on his works and found potential ally on it. On the other hand, they were also scared of antagonizing the society and thus refrained from supporting him in his social ideals. Moreover, Ramo's addiction towards liberalism and free speech was also a source of tension for the colonizers. He realized, Ramon, the rational man, realized that support of colonial authority was essential for advancing his reformation. And at the same time, his liberal rational mind also prohibited him from supporting all kinds of reducing colonial measures. Ramon had, the big ruler, British had a moral responsibility to initiate development, more specifically, capitalist development in India. And thus, he started logical debates with him non-stop. At the same time, we have to remember that Ramon very judiciously linked the issue of Indian independence with overall improvement of the country. We tried to stop imperial monopoly by developing a system of agency houses of private business with British private business of British and Indian business in separate way, apart from colonial company outside company monopoly. At the same time, you have to remember this Amon was extremely intelligent to realize that subjective and objective conditions of Indian society was absolutely unconscionable for initiating an indirect confrontation with the British. Thus began the process of non-stop intellectual discourses with the idea of constitutional liberalism was greatly admired by Ram. They successfully internalized this aspect of modernity as a measure to counter tyranny, despotism, and all kinds of social mismanagement of company group. They favored British practice of limited monarchy, which was neither despotic nor tyrannical, and above all, which is very much careful about individual rights. He was very much aware of the shortcomings of his contemporary Indian society and thus refrained himself from demanding political liberties. Actually, while analyzing Rammohan's contribution, we have to remember Biman Bihari Majumdar's discussion when he has said that the problems faced by the well-wishers of India in the first half of 19th century were not the issue of autonomy, but the bare recognition of justice and security of life. Students of Rammohan was repeated further when he demanded that India should be ruled directly by British Parliament and it should not be left entirely to government, who was nothing but a representative of the company. Rammohan, as a torchbearer of modernity, was very much against the promulgation of press ordinance of 1823. He said that absence of a democratic structure of rule in India, freedom of press was the only available way for the common people to ventilate their grievances. And for the government also, it is a way to adopt corrective steps from the inputs received. Now, let us come to the end. Actually, I will just mention 2 points. First, Ram Mohan's phase was a phase of first wave of feminism in Europe. And we all know on 1869, John Stuart Mill published The Subjection of Women. And much before that, on 1822, the modern encroachment on ancient rights of women was published by Ram Mohan, where he talked about property rights of women. And for Ram Mohan, women was the real chronicle. Now, coming to the end of my analysis, the end of my discussion, I just want to conclude again by going to the sustainability. Yes, we can say that today we have to go back to the ideas of the first Indian nationalist Ram Mohan for a sustainable future of our country, which is passing through an extreme crisis. When the three virtues propagated by Roy, that is tolerance, coexistence, and mutual understanding, are at stake. Ramohan was a person for whom rationality, compassion, and science were the main instruments in achieving this virtue. He was the first person who tutored us to oppose all evil and inhuman practices, even if those are performed in the name of protecting religion. Relevance of Ramo is syncretism is particularly increasing when there is a growing trend towards unidimensional religion, smashing all alternatives at every corner of our life. Thank you.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Thank you so much. Excellent paper. And really, I'm not doing the justice to all because you have prepared such a way. I feel that long hours we should sit together and discuss. I have so many questions, so many in my mind. So let's rethinking time has come. The way you started, very correct. You have to think what our society is, what Mohan was 250 years before. I don't want to waste time. Now I'm going to call Shampa Mishra. Shampa Mishra, Assistant Professor in Philosophy, uh, Romanando Mission Control College, Humanitarian Views, he's I'm sorry, humanitarian view of Mohan Roy on religion. So she will use the PowerPoint presentation. Please help her.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Within 10 minutes, please.
Respected dignitaries and all the participants. Today's my paper title is Humanitarian View of Rammohn Roy on Respected dignitaries and all the participants. Through the study of various today's my paper title is Humanitarian View of Rammohn Roy on religion. Like caste, introduction to activity, through the study of various of Shotitabo, Rammohn realized that each religion is at the root of social problems. Intellect, caste, unconditionality, ignorance, tradition, Shotitabo, religion, and root cause of religion, wrong, prejudice. The main problem in human civilization is institutional religion, centered on that is why he offers the religion. Rammohn Roy was worship of Brahma. In the main problem of human civilization acknowledging universal religion, institutional role of Rammohn Roy was the institutional religion. Research question. Acknowledge what is the universal religion and role of or is it religion in without religion? Is there any relation between research question? What is the Rammohn Roy religion and religion? Objective. Is religion without or humanitarian? Is there any relation between religion and method used? What did Rammohn Roy need? Analytical method as the objective in this study and humanitarian view of Rammohn Roy analytical method used from the various analytical method as the religion is a study and the secondary international being ritual and separate ideas various prayers religious found and religion is a history and mother supernational and being ritual both separate ideas and prayers religious and feeling or mystery and build a relationship between and social harmony among both religious ultimately and practical practice in the development of humanitarian build a social harmony and social harmony. Religious is the ultimate goal of religion is the development of humankind and the human desire social harmony. Answer. But when religious is practice of spiritual presence, human life is answered. Religion is important to human religion. Only the ignorant person is worship or worship. Religion is important to human religion. Only the ignorant person worship or worship. In the existence of a creator and ruler of all things is universal and human in nature. There is no difference of opinion in the existence of a creator and it rules all kind of religious orders and human in nature. Religion refers to opinion between religion and practice. On a personal level of religion, it has a larger social religion reform is not social change of social and trans on a personal level. It has a larger social signature of human progress of the natural intent, social, economic, and religious background. Ramohn Roy bears the signature of human progress in the formulate of worship to religious belief, the theism of Ramohn Roy created the foundation of numerous non-original in the formulated by of worship and so the theism of Vedanta. He laid the foundation of a religion that is the human divinity and cooperation, incorporating human and sovereignty into Brahman. He spoke of a religion that is humanitarian and compassionate. Here is reference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Only 4 minutes, 11 seconds. That's all. Really, same time. Thank you for that. Now, our next speaker is the Bhumika Doctor, assistant professor, assistant professor of history in Muralidhar Girls College, Kolkata. Her topic is Raja Ram Mohan Roy and his influence on modern society.
Okay, she has a brief introduction. My topic, I will not waste time. I would be rather brief because everybody has discussed regarding the history of Ram Mohan. It is very monotonous, might be for hearing for the topic is Ram Mohan Roy and his influence on modern society. So let's begin with the history because I'm the teacher of history, which will be same like other speakers, but I will be brief. Without it, I can't go to what I'm trying to say. Oh, Raja Ram Roy was born in the family, a conservative family in 1772. Within a short span of 16 years, he was well equipped in the Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, different 12 languages, Hebrew, Latin, English, etc. He had well knowledge over Quran, Old Testament, New Testament, Vedas, missions. Another side, that is, he was very much influenced by Sufism and Islam. Okay, this is a pertinent point because he faced criticism for this from family and society. Another thing to be referred is that he used to work in a government service in the year 1803, which he resigned in 1814 to serve the nation as a reform. Okay. Then he had read many texts and being educated in various religious texts, uh, he could bring forward the lacunae within the or the faults within the Hinduism. Okay, he therefore focused on the Hindu scriptures to revive the lost heritage of Hinduism. He did not want one thing I want to point out. He did not want any legal action like banning of such. He did not want any rebellion or revolts within the society. He rather wanted to eradicate injustices. For that, he wanted reforms from within. He wanted to change the Indians or the Hindus from within, not impose something legal actions from outside. Okay. Then he was a follower of Vedanta philosophy, Advaita. Another thing, he believed in monotheism, as everybody said. He was influenced by Christianity, Islam. But the thing what I want to point out is that he faced not only criticism from the Hindu fanatics, but he faced criticism or the criticism from the Christian missionaries too when he was against conversion. He was against the concept of conversion, forcible conversion. So he was not a blind follower of any religious, that is Western culture, and it was not true. Another thing that is in 1815, he formed the Akunda Sabha, then where Hinduism and monotheism was practiced. For that, he was criticized by Mrityunjay Vidyalankar, Radhakrishnan, etc. But in that regard, he got full support from the Christian missionaries. But for criticizing the missionaries, he had to write precepts of Jesus, where he focused on the good sides or the positive sides of Jesus. Not he appealed to the Christian people. He wrote an article where he wanted people to change, not to forcibly convert people to Christianity by giving allurances. Then he formed Vedanta College in 1826 to teach Vedanta. In 1828, he established Brahma Sabha, and 30 Brahma Samaj, where universal brotherhood was the main issue. He did not want Brahma Sabha or Samaj to come under any religious ban. For that, he had to face criticism in Chamata and Chandrika, that Hindus criticized him fanatics, and he also retaliated in the literary fashion. He was a very noble person. He never wanted rebellion. He always retaliated in a positive and in a literary manner. Okay. Then another thing, in the process of social reforms that started in Bank of Sati, he got full support from Christian missionaries and administrators. Okay, for that he took the help of the laws. He did not take the help of the laws. He never wanted legal actions to be imposed on the state. But it happened, and then things came forward and stopped the homicide, uh, which he never wanted. He wanted, with the help of the scriptures, Hindu scriptures, to change the Hindus from within. He also wanted another thing, that is the economic rights of economic rights, which was directly being decided. You know, many women were burnt alive for property issues. So he also came forward for fighting for the street dhana and the property rights, which was also slightly connected with the sati system. Okay. Everybody said regarding his writing, his inclination for English education. He got help from David here, Alexander Dow. He published two newspapers, Sambat Kaumadi in Bengali, Miratul Akbar in Persian. Though he, in his lifetime, could not see freedom of press, but after his death, actually it happened under the initiative of Thomas Metcalfe. Okay. Um, the main thrust was I'm concluding a conclusion that he was a utilitarian. He was influenced by utilitarians, Benthamite philosophy, James Mill, uh, all that, and despite his limitation, we should not highlight regarding his limitations, because we should consider the time frame in which he was living, in a transition phase he was facing. So he was also a man of self-contradiction, limitation. But barring that, he had everlasting impact on many people. My the PhD and MPhil was on the men Shahibs and white people. So I had found a connection, that is Mary Carpenter, and her father, that is Lent Carpenter, was closely associated with Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Mary had an opportunity to meet Raja Ram Mohan Roy when it was in the last leg in 1833. She had the opportunity to meet with him and get certain information regarding the condition of women in India. And when in 1866, when she comes, she spent down everything in 6 months in India in her book. She is coming here. She is working for women upliftment, education. In that regard, she gets help from Kishore Sen and Brahma Samaj, and that is the slightly different from I think others. Otherwise, everything is same. Many quotations have been said that he was the father of a modern man and other thing. And lastly, I would conclude, we are indebted to Raja Ram Mohan Roy for his unwavering faith in rationalism. He was a polyglot, polymath. He knew multiple languages. He had an uncompromising fight for superstition. He fought against idolatry, superstition, and he fought lifelong. And he was very passionate for women's reform, women's education, and women's rights. Lastly, this is a lesson that we should not ignore in this era where religious obscurantism is on rise, where communalism is gaining ground. These words are very important, I think, in today's context.
Thank you so much. I just came across your two publications. You just said about the publications. Everybody will be very happy. Just
Yes, Bengal past and present in 2010 and 2015. There are two articles from my MPhil that I'm just MPhil. It was one on white women just an overview on historiographical survey, and another is on white prostitutes. In the MPhil dissertation, I had my focus on three kinds of white women who came in India. One is the Memshans, who were the elite class of women who came in India in the colonial phase. Then another is the missionary women who had philanthropic ideas, who came as a wife, sometimes single spinsters. And the third category is the prostitutes, who are very marginal, who are nominal in number, but they also participated as a white community, came in India. During the main time frame was at that time was 1860, post mutiny. And that was my two publications in Bengal past and present. And my PhD was on the Memshahis, the elite class. And at that, I had thematically divided. They are on mental problems, their psychological problems, their tussle between wifehood and motherhood, and everything in detail. And that, in that context, many
thank you. I should tell, but I forget because of the time. Thank you. You are within time. Thank you so much for now I love to call Kaushik. Now we can see one else after a long time.
Actually, that somehow puts that Ramon somewhat success.
Yes, true.
In today's academia, there are primarily there are women.
Yes.
Okay.
Kaushik Mondal is an assistant professor of English, Joypur, Panchanam Royal College. Please.
Good afternoon, all the dignitaries and my dear colleagues.
Your topic
Is Raja Rammohan Roy, our rationalist Hindu. This was in a little detail in, but no, due to that time constraints, I would like to restrain myself from going into detail. So primarily, there are certain interesting points and interesting things that happened with Raja, and I would like to mention that at the very beginning, and I will just give my key points after that. When Raja died on September 27, 1823 at Bristol, he was still wearing the sacred thing, the poita. The poita was there in his body, and he was buried following that Unitarian tradition. And he was celebrated as a Unitarian champion, and rather what the colonial education and the colonial all the white men's burden that they delivered upon their the places they ruled. They came when Rammohan reached England. He was celebrated as the champion of the kind of education that English people were supposed to spread around the world. So he was a celebrity at that point of time, and nearly 2.5 years that he spent at England. That his pictures were continuously being drawn by the artist, and his signature on that picture was also being sold among all the people and who were interested in meeting Raja Rammohan Roy. And now quickly into the background that he was, which is not so very elaborately discussed that I have found in here. After the Permanent Settlement Act in 1793, this is I think this is also important to discuss because Rammohan was a product of his time. India was at that point of time was waiting for Rammohan, and how this really that social, especially the economic, economic resurgence and the economic change that was going into Bengal is also very important to understand why Rammohan became Rammohan. So a little discussion into that. After the Permanent Settlement Act in 1793, the age-old zamindari system changed into a capitalist management of agricultural produce. A new class emerged as an economically powerful section of society, and people from different castes constituted this class. This new class started revolting against the caste hierarchy in different forms that had traditionally been maintained till the end of 18th century. The Vaishnava sect, mainly comprising of the Swarnabonics and the Gandhabonics, were the primary sect that led this revolt. They were the primary sect that led the revolt, and it would be interesting to note that Radhakanta Dev and Motilal Sheth were the prime adversary of Rammohn right at that point of time were Vaishnavas. With the help of Western education, along with the financial mobility and social recognition, this new class gave birth to another section in Bengal society, which was later called the Bhadralok Samaj. This new Bhadralok Samaj was heterogeneous in nature. There were no fixed caste constituents of this group, and people who were ritualistically enjoying higher positions in society like Brahmins, as well as lower caste like Brahmins, comprised this group. Their commonality was in their social and intellectual outlook. All the practices, conventions, and customs related to interpersonal and social relationships, like marriage, eating together, performing rituals, as part of the social hierarchy based on caste, were being questioned and examined. Calcutta was slowly becoming a seat for revolt against age-old Hindu Orthodox social order. This revolt was more targeted towards social affirmation of wealth and capitalism over traditional value system based on religious teaching. Western logic and rationalism added fuel to this argument. Now, another interesting thing which all of you might have known, but still I'm just repeating, Pundits and eminent Bhadraloks who attended the meeting on May 14, 1816, which was called by the Chief Justice of Supreme Court at that point of time, Mr. Hyde East, agreed to the proposal of setting up a higher education institute that would impart English education to their youth. Required funds were collected through voluntary contributions from them, and the Hindu College, the Presidency College of today, was established in the next year. As per the statement, which is which is found in a letter written by Hydes to Mr. J. Harrington at London, which was dated just 4 days after this meeting happened in May 18th, he wrote, this group of Orthodox Hindu Pandits and the eminent persons from Hindu society who had agreed to and contributed from the start of Western education system for the first time in India, categorically decried Rammohn in the first meeting. They were opposed to Rammohn, and interestingly, this is interesting primarily because Rammohn was also openly advocating in favor of introducing a Baconian English education system. In spite of being a prominent social figure in Calcutta at that time, Rammohn was not liked by most of the elite for his staunch anti-idolatry stand. And his candid admiration for Islamic monotheism, as you all know, that is why the Orthodox didn't want Rammohn to be included in the organizing committee of the college. Now, interestingly, these both antagonistic parties were in favor of imparting or introducing the Western education, but they were not agreed to accept even a single penny from Rammohn for this cause. As we usually, his name is still associated with the establishment of Presidency University today, or rather the Hindu College, but this was not primarily true, but he was also in effort, his efforts were also in this line of Western education, and he wrote that in detail to that letter, the most written on December 11th, to Lord Ahmad. Now, I only quote from a small space, and I will pause that Mr. Hyde is writing on the minutes of that, as a minute of this meeting, talking afterwards with several of the convent. Before I proceed to open the business of the day, I found that one of them in particular, a Brahmin of good caste and a man of wealth and influence, was mostly set against Rammohn Roy, son of a Pattanidar under the Raja of Bardhaman, a Brahmin of the highest caste and of great wealth and land, who has lately written against the Hindu idolatry and upbraids his countrymen pretty sharply. He expressed a hope that no subscription would be received from Ramamohan Rai. I asked why not? Because he has chosen to separate himself from us and to attack our religion. I do not know, I observe what Ramamohan's religion is. I have heard he is a kind of vegetarian, not being acquainted or having had any communication with him. But I hope that my being a Christian and the sincere one, to the best of my ability, will be of no reason for your refusing my subscription to your undertaking. So Mr. Hyde, who was a Britisher, he was not debarred from giving that his contribution, and all those people agreed to accept his contribution, but Rammohn Royce was not. So that also, calls for a close scrutiny. And while Rammohn failed to capture the sentiment of his time, of the popular, sentiment of the Hindu intelligentsia, or rather the Bhadra. Now, I'll pause here without going further because I had a small derivation on some of you have already mentioned that the property right of women. And interestingly, I would ask you if you are willing to, of course, if you have not already gone through the text that's available, and there are certain specified instances from Jagdavalka Sutra and Manu Samhita, where Rammohan specifically refers to in which condition a cooling Brahman, only under 8 circumstances, he can remarry. And that is permitted in the Hindu scriptures. And most interestingly, that gives us a new perspective and, of course, a pull for thought of how, what kind of liberal ideas actually was, um, uh, propagated by Rammohan. And interestingly, those 8 things were if that woman drinks alcohol, if that woman is bearing only girl child, if she's cantankerous, if she's not being loyal to her husband, if she's quarrelsome with her in-laws, and interesting facts about that. And lastly, another thing which I would also like to think upon, and I have just got a few hints on that, that these four Banerjees, Rammohan Roy were traditionally Banerjees, and they were later given the title of Rayan, which abbreviated in later time as Rai, Rammohan Rai only. So these four Banerjees, one is Rammohan Rai, second one is Ishwar Chandra with Banerjee, we call him Vidyasagar, and the fourth one is Surendranath Banerjee, and the fourth one is Rangolal Banerjee. I don't know much about him, but all these four Banerjees were from a same clan, that is Rari Brahman and Shandilya Gotra, and they were the descendants from that celebrated 5 Brahmins who were supposed to be called by that Bolal Sen from Konoj, and Bhattonarayan family was they were all have the lineage with that, and these two key personalities, one is Rammohan and another one Vidyasagar, who fought for the cause of women of that particular group, because slowly by debarring the widows from remarriage and putting small young girls into the funeral pyre, these the proliferation of this same clan people were also being halted. That's also an observation which I have been through and which also needs some scrutiny. They were might be unconsciously or consciously fighting to sustain their own clan and the flourishment and non-extinguishing efforts of his or rather their own clan. So thank you all. Thank you KSAS for giving us the opportunity.
11 minutes, 18 seconds.
Was it right or should I be a little shorter?
Okay, it's okay. So we all know that 2-day international seminar on relevance of the universal mission of the Bengali Renaissance for the future for India and the world is organized by Kolkata Society for Asian Studies, collaboration with Abdul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies and Anthropological Survey of India. The 10th today and 11. And this international seminar is in hybrid mode. So it is in hybrid mode. So our last speaker for this session will speak online. She is Anita Singh, researcher, student from Surat. She will speak on Raja Ram Mohan Roy's modernization and writing mainly contributed to journalism. So let me uh, give this floor to uh, Dr. Anita Singh. Dr.
Uh,
Anita Singh, the
yes.
floor is yours.
Am I audible, ma'am? Hello. Hello. Hello.
I can hear you. Can
This
you hear me?
can you
Uh,
hear me?
yeah, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
You please start your talk. Okay?
Okay,
You
ma'am. Am I audible clearly?
yes. You are audible.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me opportunity to present my paper here and online mode.
Okay, thank you.
My paper is on the Raja Ram Mohan Rai's writing. Everyone talked about his every aspect of his work or contribution in the society, but I thought that his writings is more important because because of his writing the people the new education uh, age on that time very relevant today also. So who is Raja Ram Mohan Rai? So many introduction are there, but what if he said about himself? I want to quote him in his own words, which he introduced himself. In conformity with the wish you have frequently expressed that I should give you an outline of my life, I have now the pleasure to give you the following very brief sketch. My ancestors were Brahmins of a high order and from time immemorial were devoted to the religious duties of their race, down to my fifth progenitor, who about 140 years ago gave up spiritual exercises for worldly pursuits and aggrandizement. His descendants ever since have followed his example, and according to the usual fate of courtiers, which with various success, sometime rising to honor and sometime falling, sometime rich and sometime poor, sometime excelling in success, sometime miserable through disappointment. But my maternal ancestors being of the sacerdotal order by profession, as well as by birth and of a family, than which none holds a higher rank in that profession, have up to the present day uniformly adhered to a life of religious observance and devotion, preferring peace and tranquility of mind to the excitements of ambition and all the allurements of worldly grandeur. In conformity with the uses of my paternal race and the wish of my father, I studied the Persian Arabic languages, these being indispensable to those who attach themselves to the courts of the Mohammedan princes, and agreedly to the uses of my maternal relations. I devoted myself to the study of Sanskrit and the theological works written in it, which contain the body of Hindu literature, law, and religion. When the age of 16, I composed a manuscript calling in question the validity of the idolatrous system of the Hindus. This, together with my known sentiments on that subject, having produced on my travels and passed through different countries, chiefly within but some beyond the bounds of Hindustan, with a feeling of great aversion to the establishment of the British power in India, when I had reached the age of 20, my father recalled me and restored me to his favor, after which I first saw and began to associate Europeans, and soon after made myself tolerably acquainted with their laws and forms of government, finding them generally more intelligent, more steady, and moderate in their conduct. I gave up my prejudice against them and became inclined in their favor, feeling persuaded that their rule, though a foreign yoke, would lead more speedily and surely to the amelioration of the native inhabitants. And I enjoyed the confidence of several of them even in their public capacity. My continued conversation with the Brahmins on the subject of their idolatry and superstition, and my interference with their custom of burning widows and other pernicious practices, revived and increased their animosity against me and through their influence with my family. My father was again obliged to withdraw his countenance openly, though his limited pecuniary support was still continued me. After my father's death, I opposed the advocates of idolatry with still greater boldness. Availing myself of the art of printing now established in India, I published various works and pamphlets against their errors in the native and foreign languages. This raised such a feeling against me that I was at least deserted by every person except two or three Scotch friends to whom and the nation to which they belong I always feel grateful. The ground which I took in all my controversies was not that of opposition to Brahmanism but to a preservation of it, and I endeavored to show that the idolatry of the Brahmins was contrary to the practice of their ancestors, and the principles of the ancient books and authorities which they profess to revere and obey. Notwithstanding the violence of the opposition and resistance to my opinions, several highly respectable persons, both among my own relations and others, began to adopt the same sentiments. I now felt a strong wish to visit Europe and obtain my personal observations, a more thorough insight into his manners, customs, religion, and political institution. I refrained, however, from carrying this intention into effect until the friends who coincided in my sentiments should be increased in number and strength. My expectations having been at length realized, in November 1830 I embarked for England. As the discussion of the East India Company's charter was expected to come on, by which the treatment of the natives of India and its future government would be determined for many years to come, and an appeal to the King in Council against the abolition of the practices of burning widows was to be heard before the Privy Council, and His Majesty the Emperor of Delhi had likewise commissioned me to bring before the authorities in England certain encroachments on his rights by the East India Company. I accordingly arrived in England in April 1831. I hope you will excuse the brevity of this sketch, as I have no leisure at present to enter into particulars. This quote is presented here as it is. Now, if you look closely at this presented article, it is known that he has not only seen his personality but all his social, educational, and political activities through the discussion of every aspect to which he came into contact with his life journey. Through his experiences, he readily and clearly admitted to expressing his opposition to the idolatry and other rituals of Brahmin or highly casteist Indian society, and in response to it, Ram Mohan himself was opposed. In the discussion of his accepted education, he referred to the various languages and pointed out that the knowledge of a new language introduced a new civilization, and that is why he could not only know all the civilization through the knowledge of those seven or eight languages, but what can he add to the Indian civilization and society from them? How to build an advanced society it also works on. In this effort, he has not only described in detail how European civilization was a new attraction, but has also comparatively analyzed it. He died at the age of 61. At this age, he not only mastered so many fields by acquiring knowledge, but also used his knowledge for the welfare of all sectors and sections of the society. It cannot be decided in which area he did less and in which he did more. His contribution is in almost all fields of education, society, writing, journalism. These has brought him to the position of immortality. Today, even after 250 years, his relevance is no less than that of the 19th century. Perhaps that is why the Mughal Emperor Akbar II awarded him the title of Raja. Now, the impact of his thoughts on his writing, especially in Persian, English, and all this, I want to describe that Ram Mohan has been the first to take the first step in many things, such as the first Indian liberal thinker and the first Indian intellectual thinker who not only clarified the issue to the masses but also wrote the British power in their language English with full faith and firmness on his own problems and that of the people. He was already the one who discovered that the printing machine can become in the role of a press by his writing. Whether it was in translated English or Bengali, in Persian or in Hindi, be it a book or pamphlet or a newspaper, magazine, and newspaper. Ram Mohan is credited with initiating the trend of developing and using various mediums of publication for Indians in India and how it should be done by Indians. This country will always be indebted to him for this achievement. Having knowledge of different languages, he had the understanding that if the newly prevalent English language was adopted for the medium of instruction, entry of new ideas into the behavioral mindset could be easily done. In this regard, in 1821, to elect English as the medium of instruction, he wrote a letter to Lord Amherst on December 11, 1823, opposing the idea of establishing a Sanskrit college in Calcutta proposed by the great Orientalist H. H. Wilson.
Madam, sorry to interrupt you. Please
Yes, ma'am.
finish it within 2 minutes. Please
Okay,
try
ma'am.
to finish within 2 minutes, okay? Very
O-
nicely you are presenting, but it is the scarcity of time, please.
Okay, ma'am. I'm focusing on only journalism. I'm not going to into detail of my paper. Okay, if you permit me for 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Carry on.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ram Mohan played an important role in promoting Indian journalism. He was the first Indian to realize the value of the newspaper as an instrument for diffusing intellectual light. In the first issue of Miratul Akhbar, he wrote, "The object of paper is not the shower praises upon its prompters or his well-wishers or to scandalize anybody. On the contrary, it aims to reaching the truth." This statement shows his understanding about newspaper and journalism. No need to say that how inclined he was about the impact of writing via newspaper. In 1822, Ram Mohan wrote many editorials on the topics of political affairs of his time. His famous editorial criticisms were about popular Christian faith, English foreign policy, and of the British insolence on public road toward the common people. All these writings were too hard to swallow by British administration. Soon the acting governor came down the new law which not permitted the newspapers publish anything without their consent. So, immediately of the encampment of the ordinance, Ram Mohan closed down the Miratul Akhbar as a mark of protest. In the last issue of the paper, he declared his inability to go on publishing under what he considered were degrading conditions. Roy is considered to be the father of Bengal Renaissance by many historians. According to renowned historian Ramchandra Guha, he is the first liberal thinker of modern India who introduced the benefits of liberalism in India. Through his writings, whether in Sambat Kaumudi or the short-lived Miratul Akhbar, he always focused on the great issues of his time: the campaign against sati for women rights and widow remarriage he attacked by the Hindu fundamentalists of his time. In today's scenario, we consider the pattern of writing adopted by Ram Mohan as an ideal way of writing, which should be continued by this generation of writers. For example, what Miratul Akbar embodied back in the day was
Ma'am,
resistance.
no need to give the examples. Huh? Please wind it up. Please.
Okay, ma'am, then that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Be with us for another 10 minutes. So if there is any question, this is now open floor. We can take maximum 3 questions because we are running behind. It is already 1:40. So please, anyone in this floor, if you want to ask anybody, we have 9 speakers. Anyone can ask anyone. We can accept maximum 3 questions because we are running behind. Anybody wants to ask any question? Everybody is very hungry. I can understand. There is no question. Anybody? Anyone want to ask any question to anyone? No? No? Sir, for the only sir. You want to ask any question to anybody? So, really, thank you. Ma'am, do you want Dr. Singh, Anita Singh, ma'am?
Yes,
Do you want
ma'am.
do you ask any question to anybody?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. So, we are going to close this session because everybody is very hungry, I understand. So, we are going for lunch and we will come back by 2 o'clock. If possible, by 2 o'clock. Otherwise, maximum 2:10. Get us 2. Okay? Don't be late again with